4 police officers and the 2 lawyers.
I thought we'd be on break by now.
And Tom and I began having conversation about why they're here, his background, what happened to him.
Good morning, everyone.
Just getting to know each other, basically.
We're watching the Emergencies Act inquiry.
What the issues were, what happened.
We're going to get to other stuff.
In terms of the
but let's start with this.
And then we talked about from my recollection that, look, if you're
this is Ottawa City Manager testifying.
I basically advised them that if they're going to have a meeting with the mayor, they have to show something in good faith back. And
on Justin Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act.
When I came back out from seeing the mayor, I forgot to mention that. As I said,
good morning,
if I'm going to meet with them, I need to get
chat.
something back in return. I'm not going to meet with them just for the sake of meeting with them. And the police officer suggested, well, maybe we can start ask them to move the trucks out of some of the neighborhoods. I said, well, that would be a good thing to try and relieve the pressure on those people in those neighborhoods.
This is so boring.
They would agree to do that.
So OPS was the one who made the suggestion that maybe the exchange.
It's so boring.
For meeting with the mayor would be getting the trucks out of the neighborhood.
That's right.
And
okay.
So when we were talking to Tom, and I don't remember it was exactly what
so
Tom
does not justify what happened.
Keith and Eva came in after.
Are the witness statements publicly available?
After the
I'm not sure.
PLT officers also join, or was it just?
I'll put the link to this.
They came in also,
so everybody can hear it.
So they all joined the meeting at that time, and then we had a.
This will not have the viewership of the Johnny Depp trial, everyone.
The protests and would they be willing to move trucks out of the neighborhoods? They said yes.
Good morning, Rubia.
To do that. And we said, well, then we have to work out the logistics, and they'll get back to us. So we met for about, in total.
It's tremendously boring. Let me know if my audio levels are off. It's tremendously boring.
They left,
but what it's showing, this guy, forget his name now,
talk
hold
about
on.
what the terms would be of them.
This is Steve Kinalakos, and the city manager which that would for Ottawa,
and get
has said multiple times
to do that.
They did not want politicians getting involved with the situation.
Well, they didn't tell me specifically, but I assume that it was a symbolic, significant gesture. If somebody, no one was meeting with them of any official capacity at the political level. And I would think that, you'd have to ask them when they testify, but I assumed the mayor was the first step in trying to open the door.
I'll talk over this for a little bit.
Someone senior.
This is the city manager basically saying, we were trying to find a solution to this. We didn't want it to become political. We didn't want elected officials getting involved.
That were going to be taken after that meeting.
And elected officials got involved.
I think we exchanged the numbers, and then we said that
so the issue was
we'd get back.
Parked cars.
Exactly, that we'd reconnect
for
with
which
each other
Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act.
A number of things happened after that in terms
of
Where is
the Rumble? I want to see that we're live on Rumble.
Surge later in the day. And,
on the menu today, people, we're witnessing the Alex Jones effects in real time.
Well, my understanding is that the next day you did indicate to Chief Slowly and Deputy Chief Ferguson, Deputy Chief Bell,
the family of George Floyd,
relayed a little bit of the
threatening to sue Kanye West.
Is that right?
I did.
For claiming
the outcome of the meeting
George Floyd's death
and with
might have resulted from an overdose.
And
protest leaders.
Did they express any concerns about
Kanye's going to buy Ye? Kanye's going to buy.
There were a couple
Parler,
points. I mean, it depends where we are in the story.
My audio is much louder.
We hadn't
than
at that
video.
point
so
figured out the logistics of, or the terms of what the agreement would be. That happened later in the week and didn't get finalized.
That audio's on full.
Sunday the 13th, I believe. So at that point, it was more an indication of what I gave an overview of the Chief Slowly and his team.
So you were the one.
The discussion was what they had asked for and what we were going to pursue in terms of, or what we were going to start pursuing in terms of trying to get an agreement.
Yeah, James Martin says the link has the transcriptions for after testimony, but all witness gave statements in anticipation. Curious if true. I know they've been putting statements to the witnesses before they go.
That was so no details had been fleshed out at that point.
None.
Okay. So you exchanged numbers. You briefed the mayor about what had happened.
They're talking about the Emergencies Act being invoked for parked vehicles, which, according to Mathieu Fleury, are weapons. Pickup trucks are weapons. Weapons were parked all over the sidewalk.
But he was put in contact, or he was contacted by Dean French, And Dean French told the mayor that from what the mayor can speak for himself. But my understanding was that he was trying to help, and that
Good morning,
he was
Davina.
trying to help to get a resolution to this agreement that we had.
A tentative agreement, by the way. My
And,
understanding
the
is
mayor
Trudeau
passed
knew
on
about
Dean
the tentative
French to,
agreement
Serge Arpan,
and then declared the Emergencies
and I
Act
believe they had a
nonetheless.
conversation.
No
I don't know exactly
negotiations.
what they talked about. And
Tyrants
then,
do not negotiate.
Serge Arpan gave Dean French my number, and he contacted me and basically announced himself as a helpful third party that was going to try to mediate between the two to try and come up with an agreement.
Okay, so then you became the point person for that.
No, I became the point person to get to the place where the logistics were agreed to, but the actual negotiation of the terms of the letter that was eventually sent to Ms. Litch, that she replied back agreeing to.
I think we're going to put on pause sooner than later, and then I'll go back and listen to it later. I've been listening for about an hour.
I was engaged in that.
Nothing remotely helpful to the federal government.
So between February 8th, when you have the meeting with the PLT members and Tom Marazzo et al., and then the 10th of February, when the call from Dean
Good
French
morning,
comes
Viva.
in,
Was hoping you were doing
was there
some
any kind of
coverage.
movement on that
I
deal
want to see
between the
Jim
8th
Watson
and the
is on
10th?
the list today. Jim Watson is the mayor of Ottawa.
Really
not going to be a good witness.
The 10th was.
This is the witness list for the day.
What day was that?
We're at Steve Kenelakos.
The 8th was Monday.
Serge Arpin, City of Ottawa.
Was it
Sunday.
Jim Watson
the
is the
10th
mayor.
Maybe a Thursday.
I don't know who these people are.
That's something for Mr. Arpan to answer in terms of what discussions were taking place at that point. But things didn't really start taking shape till later in the week, early weekend, and it wasn't until probably Sunday morning, the 13th, that I saw a draft in terms of the terms that's in that letter that was made public.
So you weren't
Travis,
involved in the drafting of the letters?
Thank you very much.
I was involved in providing some advice on the drafting of the letters based on my discussions with police. So Serge,
we'll do this for a few minutes, then we'll end it, and I'll come back later after we cover some stuff and talk amongst ourselves.
But
so specifically, the letter
this is going to be boring as hell.
Wellington Street, was that one of the points of discussion with OPS?
It was generally, yes.
Okay. So then, if I understand correctly what you're saying, on the 10th, Dean French called and announced himself as potentially being helpful or a potential mediator. And then the letters were drafted and sent, I believe, on the 12th of February. And in that time, you were having discussions with Chief Slowly. Was it Chief Slowly or anybody else within OPS? Deputy Chief Ferguson?
No, it was, there were a couple calls. The final call was before the letters went out on, it was over noon hour on the Sunday, the 13th. It was right to the wire in terms of when the letters finally were approved.
Okay, so they're dated the 12th, but you're saying they were exchanged on the 13th.
Do I know? So
that's what
I don't know why the document was redacted.
Okay.
It was an email with him.
So while they're being finalized, your involvement is getting some input from OPS and suggesting some wording to the letter, including the area where the trucks are going to relocate to. Is that right?
Yeah, Serge had various drafts. It was going back and forth, and I don't remember the drafts, but different language, and I was providing some edits and some advice on the final language in the letter.
And why was Wellington Street chosen? Who chose Wellington Street?
Well, that came up as part of the discussion initially, I believe.
How is this similar, different to a regular hearing? Not sure what you mean by a regular hearing. This is a purely political mechanism provided for in the Emergencies Act itself, a requirement, an investigation into the declaration of the Emergencies Act. They'll make recommendations. The committee will come to its final findings
in the area.
In February 2023. This is not really like a court hearing, but at least it's adversarial.
And so Wellington Street was an option, but it was
this is an inquiry, not a trial.
Wellington couldn't
specifically provided for by the Emergencies Act.
There just wasn't enough room. So part of the discussion was, would some of them agree to move to a site? I believe it was in the West End. Prior, there was some other site they had. If they could go there, they wanted to get onto SJAM. We didn't want them on SJAM. So there was discussion internally about the parameters of where they might go, and that's what translated into the logistical meeting that we finally had on Sunday night, the 13th, when Superintendent Drummond, myself, and Kim Ayotte met with a group
February.
of representatives.
When did they
so
violently?
Before we get to that meeting, before the letters were finalized, I understand that Chief Slowly had a chance to look at those letters.
Chief Slowly is the, I believe now disgraced former Ottawa police officer chief.
I'm trying to think if he received a draft or not, because he sent me an email asking for asking me for an edit, but it was too
Davina,
late.
I hope the
Actually,
inquiry's
OTT
findings are damning.
6985, so I'll take you to that. OTT
People don't appreciate this is an inquiry into invoking the War Measures Act, the new version, the new iteration, the Emergencies Act.
Steve,
Thus far,
suggestion, alter this line
Mathieu
in the mayor's
Fleury,
letter.
city councillor, there were cars, which are weapons now, parked on the sidewalk.
Logistical
Literally.
undertaking that will probably take 24 to 72 hours. We ask that protesters stop asking more demonstrators to come to Ottawa this week and over the long weekend. So it looks like that highlighted portion of this week and over the long weekend was an edit that he wanted in that
Two
letter.
truckers tried to burn down a building, leaving the residents in fear. That, Chris Jones, is a now thoroughly debunked piece of misinformation.
Sent to convoy leadership. It just hasn't been made public, so can't make edits now. But
that alleged attempted arson had nothing to do with the protesters, nothing to do with the convoy. Thoroughly debunked.
And he wanted to make an edit, but at that point it was too late.
And if we go to OPS 10664.
Just going to pull up a link here.
We go there we go. It looks to be from Christiane Hanot, and she says, Steve, can you send me a copy of the letters we just discussed on our call? Redemo convoy negotiations. Thanks. And who did you understand her to be?
This is from CBC. I can't share it. In a news release announcing both sets of charges against the people who arrested, police said there is no information indicating the men were involved in any way with the protests. So I highlighted your comments to illustrate.
I think she was on the call, the noon hour call. It wasn't a phone call specifically with her. I think she participated in the noon call with Chief Slowly.
At least this inquiry has two sides, unlike the day democracy almost died.
I think Kim Ayotte was on the
call
also.
Fan.
So we had a call at noon hour. And my understanding from this is Christiane, is following up on that phone call.
I see. And this would be on February 13th at noon?
By the way, and that was a CBC article that had to confirm it had nothing to do with the convoy. Let me get the article so everybody can have it. It was a lie at the time because people had no reason to say it had anything to do with the convoy. And it's a bigger lie for anyone to repeat it now. But alas.
It looks like on Sunday at 1:44, you sent those letters to Chief Slowly, Deputy Chief
I'll
Bell,
put it in the
Deputy
Rumble
Chief
link
Ferguson,
as well.
Christiane Hanot, and John Steinbachs.
That's correct.
And if I can take you to OTT 7009.
OTT, eh? OTT. Here we go.
It looks like title is Police Contact, Sunday the 13th at 3:26. You say to Chief Slowly, Chief, can you please provide the name and contact info of who will be joining Kim Ayotte in the negotiations with the protest leaders to deal with the egress and, I believe that should be right? Relocation plan?
Oh, they were negotiating a relocation plan, a peaceful resolution of a peaceful protest?
Well,
let's hear it.
When the letters were sent, we agreed that we would meet that evening because we wanted to get this going as fast as possible, and that they would send a representative group to City Hall to meet with myself, Kim Ayotte, and a senior police official to deal with the logistics, because Kim and I were in no position, as I said earlier in my testimony, to arbitrarily dictate where trucks would move or to be able to manage the relocation logistically. We needed police to be able to do that, to facilitate that, negotiate that, and ensure that the relocation plan was consistent with any future plans they had, or any safety issues, officer safety issues.
Kentucky Fritz says, nice to see your pits are sweating moistly today. They might very well be, but you can't see it.
It was a subject also on the call that we needed someone senior to be part of the discussions on the logistics for the actual relocation of the trucks.
And who was provided?
Acting Superintendent Rob Drummond.
And what did you understand his role to be then? Just to, what was he going to be partly negotiating? What was going to happen?
Well, he wasn't negotiating. It wasn't really well, I suppose it could be characterized.
I'm kind of eager for them to take the morning break so we can get, not to get to some interesting stuff, get to some more interesting stuff.
Operational details.
We've gotten the gist of this guy's testimony.
When
they were trying to negotiate a settlement, trying to relocate the protesters. They're in discussions with Trudeau, knew of this, knew of the potential breakthrough with the RCMP.
On Sunday night.
Invoked the Emergencies Act, came down with a fist of fury.
Mapping out how it would work, who the contact people would be on the police side, who the contact people would be on the protester side. He was basically laying out how that
Viva, thanks for covering this. Divina, thank you very much. I'm also trying to squeeze my way into the witness list.
The idea that they would be relocating to Wellington had already been determined, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in your call earlier that morning, or at the noon call, did anybody on the call, Steve Bell, Trish Ferguson, Peter Slowly?
What are we watching?
Did anybody raise
if you don't know what you're watching, it's going to be boring.
This is the arrangement that had been reached.
Emergency Commission investigating Justin Trudeau, declaring a national emergency and invoking the Emergencies Act to violently suppress a peaceful protest. These are all the witnesses. It's adversarial in nature. You've got Ottawa Coalition, OPP, RCMP, Federal, Convoy.
Resources into it.
So we express that. So it's adversarial. There is cross-examination and good stuff at that.
And Chief Bell and Acting Deputy Chief Bell and Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson both expressed that they supported this because it would reduce the footprint and make it more manageable for their resources. They were
writing a book for someone with ADD. I don't have diagnosed ADD, but writing a book
for the movement of the trucks.
That'd be tough.
And so, despite Chief Slowly's reservations, did he ultimately agree that this should move forward?
I don't recall that he actually said he agreed, but he didn't object to the point where, because he could have obviously stopped it, but he didn't. I never heard him say, "We're a go." He was basically silent on that point.
I don't know what the redactions were. I don't think it was for it might have just been personal information of somebody, because there's no reason why anything else would have been redacted.
And so
but I don't know.
Now we're at this meeting, February 13th. You said it was you,
February
Mr.
13th.
Ayotte,
When did they violently suppress
who
the
else was there?
protest? February 13th.
I don't remember everybody's names. It was on the list. Superintendent Drummond was there.
Superintendent Chalmers.
I think
Ottawa.
Keith Wilson was there. No, Eva was there. Keith Wilson.
The 13th.
There, I believe, but maybe not. I'd have to go back. You'd have to go back to show me the document. I don't remember the other people's names.
February 20th is when it seemingly
Chris
ended.
Chris Barber, sorry, was there.
Was Tom Marazzo there?
No.
Tom Marazzo has been on the channel, ran for office. Very good guy.
Individuals would you say were there? How many protesters were there?
How many protesters?
I think there were 6 of them altogether. Okay. I don't know if Keith Wilson was there. If I saw it in front of me, I saw
Keith Wilson is the convoy attorney representing Brian Peckford as well. He's been on the channel. He will come back on to give us some updates.
But I don't
especially when there's a ruling on the charter challenge.
They weren't available yesterday, but I'm not sure if they're available now. But in any event, there were a group of protest leaders that were there, you yourself, Mr. Ayotte, and we don't have a lot of time. So if you can just briefly maybe tell us what happened at that meeting, and then we will have to get my friends to pick it up from there.
My friends.
Effectively, we...
sorry, Divina, you're still up there. Hold on.
We discussed how it could unfold, what the expectations were.
No,
what we all
Carrot, what's his name? Carrot.
The people that represented the
Kenalakos is, I guess, clearly Greek name, but Anglo.
So going to have some,
he pronounces Ayotte, which is an Anglophone way of pronouncing a French name. Ayotte, Ayotte.
And that they would be going out that night and working truck by truck, talking to everybody to get them in line or aligned to support the movement, because it was a good thing for them. And they also made it clear that not everybody will want. Some people may not want to go to that other alternate site, the farmers area.
What will happen if Trudeau is found guilty? Asks Kay Campbell 48. There's no guilt or innocence. They'll come up with recommendations, come to a conclusion, invoking the Emergencies Act wasn't warranted, and the repercussions should be political. I think that's the idea of it. I don't believe there are actual sanctions that the committee can find.
And
but don't quote me on that.
How that process would work in the morning, who'd be assigned out there from Ottawa Police. And so when we left the meeting, it was understood we had a map of where the trucks would be moved, what areas we wanted to clear out. And Rob went back then to talk to his command and the NRCC and his incident commanders to bring the resources required.
Hold on. Cakerbud says, of course, they put Viva Fry on the front page of hashtag Jewish media apparatus.
The operation started the next morning.
Am I on the front page of,
I understand
what are you
at some
talking
point the operation stopped. Do you know why it stopped?
Yeah, mid-morning it stopped because, and there was some exchanges.
If you're talking about Rumble,
I don't know if it was a phone call or text.
I didn't know, but thank you for letting me know. And I should let everyone know who's watching. We will get to Kanye.
He was expressing,
I just want to cover this a little bit, show everyone how painfully boring it is. Watching paint dry
and what the
might be more exciting because you might at least get a fly, get stuck in it.
Operation
my battery's going dead.
And weren't allowing some trucks to move on to Wellington. Eventually that got sorted out and they did move a number of
this guy's testimony. I'm going to keep messing up his
40,
name,
but that's still in dispute. And a number of light trucks also left, and we ended up clearing a number of streets.
It's Amy says, my 3 kids and I watched almost every day of you covering the convoy. My son wrote your name in an assignment of someone he respects. He said he wants to be like you because you are brave. Yeah.
So there was
brave or stupid or I don't know what I am, but
by everybody.
Nobody knew what it was going to turn into when we were covering it. It was just.
And I'm just going to take you
covering
to the last
lies.
document, OTT 7480.
Has Zexi Lee gotten her own show on the CBC yet? Oh no, I don't. It's something's coming. Something's coming for her. Some social media success.
And this is an email.
Okay, let's see what we got going on here. Ooh, juicy details. An email.
If we go down,
enhance it. I can't enhance it. That's her scrolling
yeah,
down.
No, sorry. This is.
But just to shorten up, this is a city manager right here, basically confirming the city basically had everything they needed. They just needed to coordinate with police to remove the trucks. They were negotiating with the protesters, discussing. They did not want politicians getting involved to politicize the protests further. I tweeted out what he said.
Security, but I've known Larry. I know Larry personally.
Oh, okay.
Said elected officials should not be getting involved with
this.
Must
have had some
That's what this city manager said.
Him. He says, hi, Steve. My
Justin
office
Trudeau
is
said,
looking to set up a call this morning. Wanted to provide you with some context of my concern regarding the City of Ottawa's recent decision, which led to Wellington being turned into a parking lot of 200
Wellington is the
trucks.
street on Parliament Hill.
Honestly, Steve,
that's the occupation.
Sort of agreement
it was a parking lot, although there still was a lane to get through.
Security, especially considering that we just finished a bomb blast assessment, which included the threat of explosives being transferred via large vehicles, hoping we can find time in the morning.
Bull crap, unless they mean gasoline.
That PPSC, that PPS, the Parliamentary Protective Service, did not have notice or information about what was going to be happening with the relocation of the trucks onto Wellington?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on that, but I do know that the PPS was embedded in the National Capital Regional Command Center. They are a member of Intersect. I know that Mr. Brookson spoke to Chief Slowly the late afternoon the day before when the trucks were being moved. So, you know, I think it's a fair assumption for me to make that Mr. Brookson was well informed in terms of what was happening on the ground from a situational awareness perspective. You know, the bomb blast assessment, quite frankly, I'm not disregarding it, but it was a little late then. We already had hundreds of trucks up on Wellington Street to be concerned about moving another 40 trucks up there. So you know, that's his role
they were worried about
to take care of the security of the Hill. And it's an important role and I respect that. But at the time I felt that Mr. Brookson, when he reached out to me, had the information, especially after he spoke to Chief Slowly, and I spoke to Chief Slowly after he had spoken to Mr. Brookson, and Chief Slowly advised me what the conversation was about, where he informed him what was happening. So I know there was some reporting about.
They were worried about bombs. The trucks had been there for nearly
the 15th,
started in January.
to slowly
several weeks. Oh yeah, no, and explosives
was in the late stages of
gasoline can be an explosive. Yep. And there were outdoor bonfires in pits that
up onto Wellington Street by Tuesday.
Okay, and so did you tell anybody at the federal level yourself about this deal? I know February 8th is when you kind of had that discussion, and it also coincided with a tripartite meeting. Is that something you would have brought up at a tripartite meeting?
I told, I'm not sure when, but I know I told Rob Stewart, the Deputy Minister of Public Safety, and I also sent Rob Stewart the letters that were agreed to, the agreement letters.
And so ultimately the mayor never met with the protesters, is that right?
They never fulfilled their end of the bargain, so he never met with them.
Okay. Oh, Jim Watson, you're going to have some explaining to do.
Those are all my questions.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
How did that go?
We went a little bit over,
yes, we did.
Which I regret. And but we'll take the morning break at the moment.
Okay, how long?
We can start with the cross-examinations right after the 15-minute break.
15 minutes?
And I will show a little latitude in cross-examination, given the excess of in the direct, which is pursuant to our rule.
Well, hold on. I mean, that direct was damning enough. The cross is going to be a very friendly cross.
Will be matched in terms of cross-examination time.
Well, that's going to be interesting.
So 15-minute break. We'll be back at
55.
5 minutes to 12.
They will not be back at 5 minutes to 12. Let me make my prediction now.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission est levée pour 15 minutes.
Il y a une pause pour 15 minutes. Prediction, everybody? They will not be back. Oh, it's already 11:41. They're not going to be back at 11:55. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Watching that, it's sort of painful, but it's not so boring. And this is not to say smart, educated. It's not so boring when you know what you're looking for. It's kind of like, if we can think of an analogy, going to a museum. Going to a museum is not boring if you have an interest in the artwork and you know what you're looking for. Going to a museum when you have no interest in the art and don't know what you're looking for, not a question of intelligence or anything. It's a question of personal interest. It's boring. I understand that this is going to be boring, confusing, convoluted for a lot of people who are either not interested in what's going on or not sufficiently involved in the details that they can understand the interesting details coming out in the nuanced testimony. This is the inquiry into Justin Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act. Under the law of the Emergencies Act, it says, if there's a national emergency, a threat to crisis to infrastructure, national independence, whatever, you can declare an emergency, suspend civil rights, bring in the military, just like Justin Trudeau's daddy did during the FLQ crisis of the 1970s, except Trudeau's dad had more grounds to invoke the Emergencies Act than Trudeau ever did. During the FLQ crisis, le Front de Libération de Québec, there were actual bombs going off in mailboxes. A politician was kidnapped and murdered. Pierre Laporte. During the FLQ crisis, there was actual domestic terrorism. Now, Trudeau's daddy invoked the act and then weaponized even the legitimate invocation of the War Measures Act to persecute his political adversaries. It's a freaking joke. Everybody who knows anything about anything knows that this is a joke. Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act for 3 days to rescind it prior to its getting ratified by the Senate or rejected by the Senate. So this will be boring to people who don't know what's going on, are not interested, or are not that into the details. What's the guy's name that we just watched? Steve Kanellakos. His testimony was kind of boring, but kind of not. Because Steve Kanellakos, city manager for the city of Ottawa, you'd think he might actually be sort of on the side. It doesn't sound like he was on the side of Jim Watson. It doesn't sound like he was on the side of the OPP, certainly not on the side of Trudeau. Basically said, we had what we needed to do. These were like city ordinance issues. We could tow the trucks. It was just a little complicated because you had trucks, backed up against one another. You have to clear some room to tow some trucks. It's not necessarily the safest thing. It was a question of parking. It was a question of violating city ordinances. We did not want politicians getting involved. We were negotiating with the protesters. and politicians got involved and used the nuclear weapon to resolve a protest on Wellington. So now, the inquiry itself is adversarial. So it's not like the January 6th sham, the January 6th debacle, in that you have a bipartisan committee that is arguably unlawfully formed, where it doesn't have the required quorum in the first place, that is bipartisan because Liz Cheney, who just lost her re-election bid by 32%, and Kinzinger, who is as much of a Republican as I am an American, that's the bipartisan aspect of their bipartisan committee that doesn't meet the quorum, that was unlawfully, allegedly not legally formed. Okay. What type of adversarial system do you think you have in under those circumstances? None. This inquiry is adversarial of sorts, in that you have various parties actively participating, represented with diverging interests. So it is actually adversarial. There was a cross-examination of Mathieu Fleury, Catherine McKenney, city councillors to Ottawa. Their cross-examinations didn't go very well. They did not look very good on cross-examination. In fact, they looked so bad that the highlights of Catherine McKenney's testimony that I was tweeting out over the weekend caused her to block me on Twitter. Mathieu Fleury, who testifies eloquently in English for hours, all of a sudden, when asked to explain what he meant by microaggressions in the context of the Emergencies Act, all of a sudden doesn't speak English. And then you got Catherine McKenney up on stage on a live mic, instructing the other city councillor to answer in French to frustrate the cross-examining attorney's ability to cross-examine. Yeah. Egregious abuse of power, nature lover, to say the least. So that's what's going on. Let's get into a couple of interesting stories, because now we're actually seeing in real time, we're going to call it the Alex Jones effect, the Alex Jones verdict effect. Before we do that, people, you might have noticed that this stream said paid promotion on it, because I've got a sponsor. I've got multiple sponsors now, courageous people who actually don't mind sponsoring a fringe minority with highly informed, educated, eloquent views. They don't like it, but I've got one. And it's not just a sponsor. It's a product that I actually do use myself. Home Title Lock. Now, I've been told to stick to the script because my riffing sometimes goes a little off. Home Title Lock, no joke. I'm actually not reading from the script now. You'll see I'm making eye contact with all of you. I just need to remember one point, which is the perk for using Home Title Lock. I actually use Home Title Lock. We moved down to Florida. It was someone consulted me as a potential sponsor. Home Title Lock, you got to make sure people are not borrowing fraudulently against your home, so that you find out from the bank you owe them $40,000 because someone took your deed of sale, forged your signature, and borrowed money against your house. They come to talk to me, and I say, okay, well, hold on. I need to make sure this is legit. And so I go to talk to my insurance, parentheses, in America. They reach into your bottom and they pull out money through insurance, health insurance, home insurance, car insurance, hurricane insurance. You pay up the wazoo for insurance. And it's not even clear what you get for the insurance at the end of the day. Setting all that aside, I call up my home insurance guy and I say, do I need to worry about this type of fraud? And should I use this product? And he says, yes and yes. And the way it works, you can go to the registry, the public registry, pull up a deed of sale and forge a signature and borrow money against the house. Sorry. You don't transfer the ownership of the house so you have like someone showing up at your door and saying, thank you for leaving my house right now. What ends up happening is you have collectors that end up showing not necessarily at the front door, but they say, you borrowed $40,000 and we secured it against your home. And you're like, no, I didn't. And they're like, yes, you did, because someone forged it. Home Title Lock basically surveys and notifies you and freezes any potential borrowing if someone goes and pulls your deed of sale. Now, the first thing, though, is to go and make sure that your house, your property, whatever, is actually in your name. And that is the benefit of using HometitleLock.com/Viva. I'm going to read this part. Make sure your home title security is in your name. You can do that now by going to HometitleLock.com/Viva. Use my promo code to enter your address for a free, no obligation home title scan. That's $100 value. Free. So if you own property in America, this is not for Canadians. If you own property in America and you want to make sure that you don't get defrauded out of the equity in your property or have someone add to your already existing mortgage, go to HometitleLock.com/Viva. Make sure that the title is in your name. $20 a month. you'll get notified, or $19.95 for the psychological aspect. You'll notice that if someone does try to borrow against your house, you'll get notified. There'll be a freeze on it, so they cannot borrow against your house. And I'm going to have them on Friday for 10 minutes to explain. Now I'm going to bring up Viva is a grifter, Keith Hutchins, who I know is a proud troll of the channel. And I say troll humorously. Keith, you should learn the difference between a grifter and a hard worker. Ironically enough, by the way, grifter and grafter, two different words, and they mean diametrically opposing things. Grifter, for those of you who don't know, is an individual who creates drama in order to profit from the drama. That's what a grifter typically means. A grafter, under British lexicon, is someone who works hard. So that's a typo. Keith, I presume that's a typo, and you meant to call me a grafter, because I am, in fact, a hard worker, a diligent hard worker, despite all of my propensities for wanting to go out and fish 24 hours a day. So that's it. Viva, HomeTitleLock.com/Viva. You get the free assessment, $19.95 a month, so that you can at least rest assured that if something happens, you're going to get notified and that they're not going to be able to go that one step further and borrow against your property. Now, the Alex Jones effect. Do we move this on over to Rumble exclusively? Let's do it. Let's do it. I didn't put the link in. Let's get on over. Let's mosey on over to the Rumbles exclusively, so we can go party hardy over there. Not so we can do anything that I wouldn't do here. I'm going to post this stream to YouTube tomorrow, because Rumble supports free speech. Rumble supports creators who supports free speech. And that means sometimes tolerating the speech of people who you don't like. You don't need to protect the speech that you do like. That's not the speech that needs protection, people. So let's wind this up on YouTube. Head on over to Rumble. I will give me 2 seconds to put the link here. And we're going to talk about the Alex Jones effect. We're viewing it in real time. Ironically, now I see the ad on my video is Home Title Lock. Link to Rumble here. Boom, shakalaka. I'm going to pin it, and then we're going to move on over to the east side, because we're moving on up to the east side. Let me see here. I just saw a super chat before I go over. There it is. Quick take on the fishermen getting arrested and having their property taken as evidence. The walleye cheater guys. Well, I don't know what property was taken as evidence. The civil forfeiture stuff, not a fan of, period. In fact, not a fan. Vehemently against civil forfeiture. It's just non-judicial theft. Seizing their boat, their tackle as evidence, I could imagine there being some correlation there. To the extent they get it back, investigate, get it back. But the charges, dude, they were attempting to fraudulently misappropriate close to $30,000 in winnings. That's a threshold. That's a big threshold. Thank you for the super chat. But yeah, no, civil forfeiture is a very, very big no-no. It's seizing of property in the absence of a court order at the investigative level only, and then sometimes you never get it back. No. Okay, ending on YouTube, going to Rumble. People see it.